Hey everybody, how's it going? Sam LG here with a new video. By the title of it, you probably know what it's about, so let's just jump right into it. Although before we do, I should have you guys check out my previous video about how to drop an accent or learn a new one and basically have fun doing it. Anyway, so giving you guys a little background story first, just so you guys know the context and what I'm talking about. Back in high school and even back in middle school, I had to learn, American history just like everybody else does. However, something came up and I kind of realized this about halfway through high school. Most of the history that we're learning is pretty much a one-sided argument, usually from the US perspective. I didn't really get a lot of information from any other sources. And it wasn't until it was my senior year in high school when my IB 20th century history teacher made it her job to try to give us more information to get multiple different perspectives on issues all around the world. More specifically, I'm talking about World War II. So, as we all know, the US on D-Day got onto the beach in Europe and started to make their way up into Europe. We all know that, we've all learned that, and yeah, while we've studied that for many years, what we don't know is the other side of Europe and what they were up to. And what I mean by this is Russia. So, pretty much in history books that I've studied, how it goes is the US enters into Europe and makes their way up into Berlin, and in that time, we basically just have a small little blurb that says, and Russia made their way down to Berlin from Russia. What we don't know is the stories behind that and what really happened up there. Now, this video is going to be divided into two sections. I'm going to be talking about one of the major weapons that made a huge difference in Russia's part in this war. And the second one is going to be about a blockade that was one of the most overlooked issues that I haven't even seen in any of our history books. So the first one I'm going to be talking about, and you'll see the second one in a brand new video that will come out pretty much the same time this one does, maybe a few days afterwards. But anyway, talking about the weapon. So around 1941, Russia was working on different types of weaponry and things to help out during the war. Now, we all know that, machine guns and pistols and whatever weapons the Germans and the US were using at the time were great. However, Russia made a weapon that I think was probably one of the better ones at the time and really made a difference in helping them make their way down to Berlin. What I'm talking about is a weapon called the Katyusha. Now, every history book I've read mentions nothing about this weapon, and it played a huge part in Russia's ability to withstand German forces, along with, of course, weather and other issues. But the Katyusha was just a really important weapon in this war, and it really helped the foothold in this war and make their way down into Berlin. What the Katyusha is, or was at the time, was basically a series of 4 rockets that were mounted onto trucks, and they were secured with a giant bracket, and of course these things could move, which made them super different from the traditional rockets that the US or Germans or any other countries had at this time. Now, the issue with this rocket in particular was that it was super inaccurate, but with trucks that had 4 of them mounted at a time, it made it super easy for a bunch of these rockets to be fired at one time, and then by the time the opposing forces got around to trying to find where these guys actually shot from, they would drive off. So it would make for a great situation, which kind of helped with another issue that these rockets had, in that it took about an hour to an hour and a half to reload each of these trucks, because each truck carried 4 rockets. Now, again, talking about how inaccurate these things were, yeah, they were pretty inaccurate. But at the same time, these rockets would fire off like a bajillion at one time, and it was crazy. There's even other videos of this thing on YouTube. It's just ridiculous. And what would happen was, yeah, all these things would go crazy. They would crash everywhere, and it would basically just kill off a whole giant area of land and anybody who was standing on it. Now, another thing that made these rockets super unique was that they had a really differentiated sound that they would make, and this was primarily used as psychological warfare for the Germans. What the Germans nicknamed this particular rocket, or this weapon, was Stalin's organ, as in the piano, not the actual body organ. And the reason for this was that when the rockets would launch, they would make a really unique sound that when the Germans heard it, they would automatically just cringe because they knew, oh crap, something's going to go down. So psychological warfare was a huge part in this, and these rockets really helped Russians advance forward. Now, earlier I also mentioned that weather played a huge role in this war as well, which is true. In Germany, the winters aren't as horrible, I guess you could say, as they are in Russia. Now, when Hitler ordered German troops to advance north, and they got to roughly Moscow, even up into Leningrad, present-day St. Petersburg, the Germans were not prepared because they had no idea how harsh the weather conditions were. So most of them would just basically suffer from the cold, and this is when the Russians would advance forward. Now, this, here together with the Katyushas, made for some really important advancements for the Russian troops, which really helped them push down German forces all the way down into Berlin. This, all the information that I've been talking about, is information that it was left out of the history books that I've read. I'm not sure if other people have read any of this kind of stuff before, but this is all information that, with me growing up in a multilingual household, multicultural household, which allowed me to look at all these different things, allowed me to basically see that, you know, history is not just a one-way thing. Yeah, in the U.S., we learned that the U.S. played a huge role in D-Day and the fall of basically Hitler. Now, while this is true, again, we kind of forget that it wasn't just the U.S. in this war, it was also Russia, and Russia really played a significant role in pushing the Germans back. Russians, I would actually say, defeated more German troops under harsher conditions than the U.S. did in France and then going up into Germany. I mean, think about it. From Moscow and St. Petersburg, which is pretty much almost near the Arctic Circle. No, they're not, but they're pretty close. Not super close, but they're up there. Russian troops had to advance down through what would be present-day Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, and then Berlin. The U.S. came over through what is England and France, and then they just kind of went straight up into Berlin. Yeah, they did encounter some harsh conditions. Nothing to say about that. I'm not bashing on the U.S. at all. What I am saying is that this information, while helpful and great to learn, is not the only information that's out there. You got to look at this from multiple different perspectives. Now, I'm not even talking about Hungary's role in this war, the Czech Republic or Slovenia, Slovakia, whatever it might have been, Italy. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about what happened in Russia. Now, like I mentioned earlier, in the next video, I'll be talking about a blockade that German troops basically had around what I mentioned as Leningrad, or present-day St. Petersburg. So look for that video. It'll